Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Recently, when my channel crossed the 2,000 subscriber count milestone, I put out a call for questions, thinking to do a question and answer video, as is sometimes the BookTube tradition when such milestones are reached. I thought long and hard about the questions and the answers when they came in, and then got distracted by other things. And so I am going to take them up now after a window of time in which I have not been thinking about them. So these will be more or less impromptu answers. But I did give a lot of thought previously. It's just my life has been in a bit of turmoil recently. But with the addition of new subscribers, I thought, well, it would be a good opportunity regardless to reintroduce myself to new viewers. And so I am going to do this. I will try not to run long, although that is my typical want. So let me dive right in. And pardon me if I get your names wrong, or say the name of your channel wrong, and I will put in the description box timestamps for the various questions. I think I have 9 questions totally. I apologize if I have missed anything. I work by hand, and oftentimes YouTube does not send me notifications of comments or whatever when they come in. So I just sort of have to catch them as luck would have it. So the first question and the second question kind of go together. The first, Cian Moeller, if I say that correctly, or Cian Moeller, my apologies. How many non-human animals share your abode? And then the second one by Patricia Crabtree. How do you manage cats and dogs and birds in an apartment in the city? Well, the first one is pretty easily. An inventory reveals that we have 10 cats. Just 2 months ago, that would have been 9 cats, but we have a new Maltese colored addition to the feline family. We have 2 dogs and 1 parrot. So how do we manage all of them? Well, it is really not easy at all. Right now, the main concerns we have, well, there are constantly issues all the time that we are having to deal with. One of the troubles is dealing with animal depression. You would think that animals don't get depressed, but we recognize the signs of it. And the main at-risk groups right now are our biggest dog and our, well, until 5-6 weeks ago, our smallest cat. The small cat is largely relegated to the bathroom because she hates other cats. She attacks them and then winds up getting attacked, and her small size does not help her, and then she goes and pees around the apartment. And so she's largely dedicated to the bathroom with little bits of out time here or there as we can manage it. And then every evening she goes into the bedroom to sleep with whichever of the humans happens to be in the bedroom that night, sometimes both. She lately has had some illness. That's another factor, which is managing animals can be kind of difficult, especially in Chicago, where the vets are exorbitant. But she has lately been showing more signs of wanting to get out. We we have been sort of house sitting and doing some gardening at a suburban house, and we brought this cat over there and gave her free rein to the whole abode, and she seemed quite happy. There being no other cats, she didn't seem inclined to pee anywhere, and so we are thinking about trying to make an experiment of this, maybe leaving her there a little bit, though being by herself won't probably satisfy her ultimately, but we are thinking with a view towards when the occupant, the owner of the house, comes in, of perhaps making a gift of this cat. Now, this is keeping things all in the family, I should say, but I will say no more about that. Now, the other fellow who sometimes gets depressed is our big dog, the one who collided into me 5 or 6 weeks ago and probably gave me permanent knee damage. Now, it's all poo-pooed by all of the working professionals who have looked at it, and the x-rays revealed nothing. You can hear him back there. The x-rays have revealed nothing major, but I was just at, we have on Clark Street a theater bookstore, and I could not crouch down to see the books in the used bins beneath the shelf of theater books. So I have a long ways to go. I have decided to suspend physical therapy at this time because I feel good enough overall to not need it anymore. But he is a problem because, well, he's got no friends. He's a rollicking young boy and would like to have a friend. We bought him initially to be a friend to our other dog, but she will have nothing to do with him. The reason being he can be a little bit much to bear, and with him play can turn into the next thing. And as I can attest to from personal experience, when one plays with him, it is very easy to injure oneself just due to his over-exuberance. I can tally the, I can add the recent clinic visits to the tally of money that this rollicking boy has cost us, but the vast bulk of the sum has been from injuries to cats. And he is not a bad-tempered dog or anything, but when you have cats that, particularly that orange one you see in some videos, who decides to attack another one, well, the one that is attacked may run as prey, and then when there is prey in the room, the big dog lets his instincts take over. So fortunately, during the years of COVID, we were not taking any vacations. If we had been, things might have gone a different way for a couple of cats. Probably not. We would probably have had to cancel vacations. We call him the cat killer, but so far none of the cats has been killed, but that is due to medical interventions in 3 cases at least. So trying to keep him happy while trying to keep everybody else safe is a difficulty. So when I am alert and in the room, then everything is fine. If I am not alert, then he probably needs something on his face, which he is not happy about. At times we put him into the yard where he can play as he likes, but I don't like to leave him alone, unsupervised. And it gets much more involved than that. One must be very alert to what is going on at all times amongst the cat population. And then there are other things, just intra-cat problems which occur. So lately there has been an issue with our oldest cat who has been feeling insecure. We have a whole bunch of adoptees from Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, and Egyptian cats are a very different animal to the domestic feline that we have here in the United States. They come from, generally speaking, a long line of alley cats dating back to the pharaohs, and their view, their outlook on life is just very different. And our older cat, who is an older Siamese from a shelter down in Peoria, I think has been put out by them, and he is trying to assert his privilege as the elder member of the household by spraying here and there, and we have not really been able to deal with that well as yet. The best we have been able to do is catch the incident when it happens and clean it up. But so there are problems such as that. As far as the other issues with managing such a household, you've got the constant influx of supplies. We try to keep our eyes out for sales and such. We recently had a good deal on kitty litter, and so actually this house that I mentioned is chock full in its garage with sacks and sacks of kitty litter, which will come over to the apartment as needed, or when the occupant finally moves in, which is proving to be a longer time in coming than any of us ever expected. So there is that. The issue of the vet is really difficult, and so we try not to take them to the vet if we can avoid it, and we try, if it's something that we can creditably diagnose ourselves, rely on stores of, say, the typical antibiotic that we have leftovers from, or that kind of thing. And then we have different vets in our general area with different price ranges. We sometimes go quite a bit out of the city to a vet who is less pricey than any of the ones in the city, and who can take you on a moment's notice, or if you call up for an appointment, it'll be the next day at the worst, kind of like the old-fashioned vets like we used to have in the city. The vets in the city have largely been taken over by chains and by greedy individuals. So just to walk into a vet office is like $800 before, and then there are certain standard things that they're going to do, and you know that they're going to do. So we have different vets, and for different situations we go to a different vet. One of the best things that we have found to do is preventative care, or preventive care, such as not letting a cat get mauled by a big, white, friendly, rollicking dog. So that probably is enough for that question for now, but I could go on and on about cats, and I barely touched upon the bird. The bird is the least troublesome member of the household, I should say. He is a joy. For him, we make his own chops, so every so often, every month and a half, we have to have a big chop making effort. It requires the food processor and the chopping board and the knife, and we get it done, and then it goes into the freezer and gets doled out on a daily basis. He also takes some pellets and more human cookies than he should rightfully be having. On to the next set of questions. Joshua Crebo from Joshua Crebo Reads asks, what is your process for composing a poem? Do you write the lines down immediately on paper, or compose the whole poem in your head first? Do you often make edits? And next question, Hurricane Henry, if I have that right, Hurricane with a K, asks, how did you get into poetry? You've probably talked about it before, but I haven't seen it. As I said, no worries. I have talked about it, and I will try to be brief. When I was young, in 6th grade, my grammar school teacher, Mr. Wardlow, must have had some kind of a poetry unit for the class, and he assigned all of us to write a poem. Now, he showed us a picture of, it looked like it was some kind of a shipboard scene. I don't remember the photo itself. Actually, I wish that I did. Told us to write a poem about it. And I went home that night. That was my homework assignment, and I did it, wrote the poem, but it was more than that. Something happened to me that was unexpected, and all I can say now, looking back in retrospect, is that I had my first encounter with the muse. So I've pinpointed my age to age 11, and it was kind of a big deal. I knew something major had happened. When Mr. Wardlow was collecting the poems, I recall he glanced at mine and his face lit up and he said, "Some of these poems may even get printed in the school newsletter." And then 6 months later or whatever, when the newsletter came out, one of those poems was printed in the school's letter. It was mine, and that fact was not lost on one of my classmates, at least, who was real upset about it. I don't know if that led to a phase of bullying or not, but it well may have. I think it was the first thing I had done in my life that I had felt an ego boost for, or had been bolstered by a bit of praise, because I was not a great student. I was a poor student. I was a lazy student, if you listened to my teachers. So it became a major thing. Forgot about it here and there, but the idea of writing stuck with me. I did try to follow it up with a poem or two poems shortly thereafter, but I can't place it, which fell completely flat because they were dishonest poems, and I realized that I had to wait for the inspiration for the muse. I could not force this kind of thing, and that was what happened. Fast forward a number of years, probably in third year high school English. At that time, I was simultaneously full-time in college, so I was covering a lot of the same stuff in my college English class. And in both of those classes, I was introduced to Emily Dickinson. Now, I don't know if I had picked up Robert Service and E.E. Cummings before that, what I was doing, but Emily Dickinson made a big impression upon me. Somewhere around that time, before probably, I was already starting to write. And then in college, that was already college. That was a junior college. And then when I went on to University of Illinois at Chicago Circle, I took a writing workshop, and just it has gone on. It became sort of the primary vocation of my life. Now, as to the process, Joshua, there are many different answers to what is my process for composing a poem. Now, I've been at it for a long time, so the most succinct and the most usual way it comes about is I hear some far off knocking. There is possibly some inspiration, and so I just sit down, take my pen, and write, and just write what the muse says to me or what the muse delivers me. Now, that is not always the case, and while I was learning, it was not that way either. There was a lot more effort involved. But a different type of poem, and I try not to write poems anymore. I really don't want to write, but it happens. But a different way of approaching a poem would be sort of the problem poem. And I've read it somewhere. I included it in my book, The Rip of Gales. It's a poem comprising 4 haikus, and I decided to just use the haiku as a stanza and make them rhyme a little bit. So it was A, B, A, B, A, or no, was it A, B, A? No, well, I can't remember. I think it was A, B, A, and then C, B, C. That was how it went. And so there were 4 of those. And so in that kind of case, you're just kind of fiddling around. You're trying to solve the puzzle. In no case are you worrying about what you're going to say, because I had a general idea. I was a little bit miffed at something that a poet friend of mine had said. So that was in the back of my mind. And then when the poem came out, you don't have to worry about what the poem is going to be about, what it's going to say. It will just be there. And so it was. And so the finished poem came, and it existed as it stands in that book. So those are the 2 ways. Now, sometimes the inspiration will come to me when I am not in a position to, I moved from a different spot to this one because I was disturbed by a mosquito, and now I think I have just seen another one here. If I'm in a position where I can't write, then I will try to just keep it in mind. If that's the case, because I know how the muse operates, all I generally worry about is, say, the first couplet or the first quatrain. Sometimes if the muse keeps coming, then I will just keep composing, but I really try to make sure that I know the first one and maybe some of the rhymes, because it's not always easy to reconstruct it. So it's best if the muse is contented with just letting me recall one quatrain, then I can just kind of use that as a bookmark, and then 5 hours later or whatever, when I get to some place where I can sit down, then I can just take it and start from there. But it comes from having a long-standing relationship with the muse. Do I often make edits? No. Edits you have to make while you are in process. I do make edits otherwise, but generally that will be correcting mistakes. So in one of my, I have several books of Villanelle's. There's one where, it's heavy on one rhyme, and I think it has the rhyme. This is not it, but it's something like row, go, no. And at some point it switched to the plural, so rows, goes, knows. And then one of the words that rhymed with it was something like arose. So there was no going back to correcting that. And I just made a decision. I'm not going to scrap the whole poem. I probably didn't recognize it until much later, because when I'm writing, I don't really review that much. I'm just going to have to let it stand with the error. In one of my plays, I did something similar. I had a blind lady who then saw, and that required the addition of a sentence to just make it workable. Okay, good. I hope those answers are satisfactory. I could go on with any of these, Josh. I mean, I know that you have done your share of versifying. I would be happy to hear more about how you have gone about it. Number 5, Goat Poets, what advice or constructive criticism would you give to my yearish-old poetry/criticism channel? Thanks. I should say that a number of the folks here, which, as I say, will be in the timestamp, have channels of their own, and I would suggest that you go check them out. So I thought, my friend, that this was the hardest one. I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and really could not come up with any good answer. There frequently, I am part of the BookTube community. Your channel is, as yet as I perceive it, more of a lone wolf sort of thing, so not really enmeshed in any community per se, other than the poetry-loving set, which is fine. But oftentimes in BookTube there will be sort of questions asking the old pros, and please, nobody should ask me for advice about anything, particularly this kind of advice. Now my leg is going asleep, pardon me. And the answer will often come about something, a lot of booktubers will say things to the effect, well, just be true to yourself. Don't worry about the metrics. Don't worry, people will talk, well, book reviews don't get good ratings, other things will, and they will say, just, follow your heart, just do what works for you. And I think that is probably the best advice that anybody could give. But for some reason, I started thinking about Abraham Lincoln, who had thoughts about people practicing law. And so I pulled one thing out. I originally encountered it in a book somewhere, but I have no idea where or how I would find it. It's probably in the Library of America set somewhere. But I thought his words were pretty sage and sagacious. There is a vague popular belief that lawyers are necessarily dishonest. I say vague because when we consider to what extent confidence and honors are reposed in and conferred upon lawyers by the people, it appears improbable that their impression of dishonesty is very distinct and vivid. Yet the impression is common, almost universal. Let no young man choosing the law for a calling for a moment yield to the popular belief. Resolve to be honest at all events, and if in your own judgment you cannot be an honest lawyer, resolve to be honest without being a lawyer. Choose some other occupation rather than one in the choosing of which you do in advance consent to be a knave. And I think that sort of bleeds into questions that persons making BookTube or YouTube content do face, which is, to what extent should I go for clickbait and that kind of thing. You do learn things about the algorithm, titles with numbers in them, the 10 best, whatever. These fare better than other things. I don't think that there is anything wrong with going for clicks. It just depends on what you are after with your channel. And I think you have already faced some of these concerns just on your own and talked about that a little bit. But I hope that's a useful reply. I think I could go on and on about this topic as well. For myself, a corollary is when one is a writer of poetry, it becomes a matter of some importance what you read and that kind of thing. To quote the joke of Tom Lehrer before one of his songs, "Life is like a sewer. What you get into it, what you get out of it depends on what you put into it." And that I learned early on that is really that really obtains with writing poetry and probably with art of any sort. So number 6, sailing through books. This is multi-part. We've got 4 questions. Have you learned to read poetry aloud with a formal approach, or is it something that comes naturally to you, like instinctively understanding the rhythm and flow? I would say it does not entirely come naturally to me. I did not learn it through any formal approach, but I did learn it just liking to read poetry. And then, I suppose I should go look at some of the old videos I did on this channel. It started very much with me just reading poems to see if there's been any improvement. But one thing that I have found, first off, you don't want to read too fast. Then second, you want to clearly articulate. When I was younger, I did some voice training. I wanted to be a singer, and I thought, well, I should study to be the best, which in my childish mind I equated with opera singing. So I took a couple of years of voice lessons with an opera singer, and learned that, say, when you just sing something, your final consonants sometimes are eclipsed or are not heard. And that was, you still today hear people who have not had any kind of instruction when they sing will omit those. And when we all know what we're saying, it doesn't really matter. But say in the case of the singer, they may be singing in a foreign language or to a foreign audience. So it's really important to get that articulation in there. And so I try to do that when I read. Sometimes I don't. It's just I'm not always laser focused. And then the third thing is to remember, generally speaking, at the end of the line, there is a pause. There doesn't have to be a comma to make you pause, but just when you get to the end of the line, there is a pause. It need not be a actual physical pause, I guess I should say, but in mind you have to remember that there is a pause. So in the Shakespearean line, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Let me not to the marriage of true minds. There is a pause there, but it's entirely mental. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. So those are all that I know as far as reading poetry aloud. 2, do you journal or keep some kind of a commonplace book? I do not journal. When I was young, I did a lot of that and got rid of them all. I was pretty neurotic, I think, as a young man, though I wish now that I had kept them because they might be interesting to review, just going back to see where exactly my mind was at. And as far as a commonplace book, when I was, say, in college, I did some of that stuff. I would write down things that I came across. I have an old one somewhere buried away that I come across once in a while. So there's a little bit, it was during the phase when I was reading Carl Jung, and find quotes that are just very interesting. And now I think, gee, I wish I had kept this practice up. But nevertheless, I didn't and I don't. For a long time on Facebook, I used sort of Facebook as my commonplace book. When I came across something interesting, I would quote it. And but I generally don't. Generally, I don't. I've been told my reading comprehension is poor. I don't necessarily read things for comprehension. I would like to, but I don't. I definitely don't read for retention. I understand that when you read something, it may disappear. I don't see a lot of use to retention. The kind of retention that you want regardless is not some pithy statement or other, but some kind of general principle that you can put into use. And generally, in my own case, in the writing of a poem or whatever, in this vast store of forgotten lore, when I need something, sometimes the muse has access to it for me. Number 3, what things, moments, books have shaped your political philosophy? I really don't know that that is a real tough one to answer, and I mean the good one to answer would be books, and I am just not sure. I think for me the biggest influence on my political philosophy was a woman that I met in college. She was a classmate in the poetry workshop that I took with Paul Carroll at University of Illinois, and we became friends. A number of us formed a poetry group, but she and I became friends, as did a number of us in the group, respectively, for a long time. In this case, I think in all of our cases, for the rest of her life. And she certainly influenced my political philosophy. When I was 18, I voted for Ronald Reagan to be president, and never did again, and largely through conversations with her, and never voted for a Republican again, I should say. And I think it just has to be from the years of discussion. Now we had a falling out at one point, and so many years we were not having conversations, I should add, and then we reunited again later in life, and then she became sick and died. But I began probably on the very Republican side of the spectrum. I was a huge fan of Gerald Ford before I understood how stupid some of his statements were, like the one about there is no foreign domination or Soviet domination in Poland. But just, I think it is a natural process as one ages to become less conservative. And that is what has happened to me. So partly thanks to my friend Marcia, and then just partly thanks to the school of hard knocks. Sorry, I just had to throw that little trite phrase in there. So number 4, a poem for difficult times. Has a poem ever made you cry? I think I'm feeling the result of that mosquito sighting. I guess it really depends on what sort of difficult times. Certainly. I mean, you know, the poem which saved my life is the one by Emily Dickinson. Much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye. Much sense the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this as all prevail. Assent and you are sane. Demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. And that has rescued me from many a troubleless time, many a time of trouble. And there are many poems I think that can do as well. I would easily say an ode by Keats, or a Song of Innocence, or Experience by Blake, that kind of thing. But it far be it from me to point you on the road. You are familiar with the works of Robert Service. I think a lot of his work would be suitable to difficult times. And poems have made me cry. I can't particularly point to any example. So, on to the next question. I hope I have answered you sufficiently. Questioner number 7, Hannah's books, and this is also sort of a tough question. both what you write and what you read is quite consciously connected to the politics of today. Have you always taken that approach, or do you think you do now primarily as a result of the current situation? And those are, I'll try not to be facile. Number one, the current situation has been the current situation for me while I've been writing. That is to say, I think, speaking back to when Ronald Reagan ascended to the presidency, the country took a shift, and that was evident. And so here and there, my poetry has touched upon that. Now, that has not been a primary focus. The question comes, I think, because I recently, this year, my latest book and hopefully my last book deals with explicitly the situation in fascist, Trumpist America. It is an exercise of free speech and an act of high disdain, perhaps, for the persons that we have in power at present. But the bulk of my writing has by no means been invective only, or invective-laced screeds against whatever political injustice was bothering me at the moment. But that is always a possibility. Recently, Pat at Book Chat with Pat did a focus on Robert Frost and mentioned the famous speech that President John F. Kennedy gave, his last speech. And I had never heard it before, and what a wise man. I mean, he may have been somewhat lax or somewhat dissolute in his personal life. I cannot speak to that. But when it came to the words he spoke, I can't think of a wiser man than he. And he said in his last speech at Amherst College, if sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of our society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate any true artist, makes him aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential. Parenthetically in that, or if you deconstruct that sentence, in there is the phrase, sensitivity and a concern for justice must motivate any true artist. I think he is right. I don't consider poetry explicitly an art, but that's a technical matter. But I do believe that it has to deal with the truth. And I should say, when I was young, in Taiwan, I bought this, Galileo, but there is an appendix in here, which is just marvelous. Writing the Truth, 5 difficulties. And so this idea of writing the truth was in my mind at a very early stage. And I won't go into the details. He gives there 5 different points. It requires, number 1, the courage to write the truth. Number 2, the keenness to recognize the truth. Number 3, the skill to manipulate the truth as a weapon. Number 4, the judgment to select those in whose hands the truth will be effective. And number 5, the cunning to spread the truth among the many. Now, I loved his plays, his early plays, when I encountered them, because the characters seemed as real as any of Shakespeare's, not because of the didacticism which hampers many of his plays. He is very, very much a Marxist polemicist in many of his plays, and I don't think that that serves him well. I did not subscribe to his 5 points as any kind of a program or gospel, but the general idea of writing the truth. So he says in there something to the effect, if you just write that the rain falls downward onto and hits the grass, that's a truth, but that's kind of a pretty tepid or a milk toasty truth. But if you write the rain falls downward and lands upon the privately owned grass, well, that's a different matter. Then you're touching a truth which is more close to his heart. And so I think that is something which informs probably everything that I write. And then I was looking and looking and looking for a quote in here, and maybe it's in a different thing. I did a video talking a little bit about this book, and he talks about the child's relationship with their mother. But in here I thought it was here, I'm pretty sure it's Sachs somewhere. He talks about the dual nature of language. There is one, so when the child is saying, I'm hungry, you can take that as an expression of feeling. But quoth Oliver Sacks or somebody he's quoting, it's more he wants to influence his mother. He's saying, bring me some food is what he's saying, but he's not saying it that way. Or his other, he might be crying or something. And so language always bears these two aspects, I guess. Poetry, certainly. And if you take a poetry writing workshop, they always focus on the wrong thing, which is this expression of your feeling. And when one writes, and this goes back to Joshua's question, what one is feeling is almost immaterial. One is feeling things all the time. When one writes a poem, it will work its way in there, whether you like it or not. That can be more or less of an intent when you write it, but it's not really a primary factor. The more critical thing is the other one, what you want that reader to do. And here is where, when I write, it is not at all something as crudely unvarnished as some of Bertolt Brecht's Marxist propagandizing in his plays that lean that way. Now, his poetry is a different matter, I should say. But it is more like in his autobiography, or his memoir, I think is the right word, Placido Domingo, the famous tenor, writes about a conductor. And I don't think I possess that book anymore. Possibly I do, boxed up, but I bet I don't. I don't know. But this particular conductor would always conduct the third beat of any measure or something like that unclearly. And the objective of that was to get the musicians to focus that much more strenuously upon what he was doing. And so any program that I have as a writer of poetry is something like that. And that, to a degree, there can be some conscious ambiguity that can go into a line, but it's all ultimately for that purpose. The purpose is just saying, pay attention. We writers of poetry don't generally have any heavy opinions this way or that way about, say, a political thing. I've said in terms of fascism, I mean, if I were born at a different time in a different place, fascism may have been the only option. and I may have set well with it, but we just sort of take what's available in the ether and use that. And as I say, I mean, this idea of free speech has gone way back with me. It's meant something to me, and so, but the opportunity was there. Now you mentioned that it seems like what I read also seems quite consciously connected to the politics of today, and I suppose that's true. But it may be just that I find those connections because I am bringing them there. I will not deny that I have gotten more than one reading suggestion from Brian at Bookish, and often his suggestions will be very relevant to the political situations of today. But even in cases where not, so when I was reading the Chinese archaeology, which I wanted to make my focus of reading for this year, I recall talking about the Shang Dynasty, I think it was, or the I'm not sure who it was. It might be the Zhao Dynasty, but I think speaking Shang Dynasty particularly, and before he talks explicitly about the ancient Chinese almost fixation, you might say, on maintaining the supply lines for all these precious elements and precious goods and commodities. And now we find ourselves in a situation where all of the supply chains for most everything in the world now is controlled by China, with a little bit allowance here and there to others. So it is always relating that stuff, and then in another respect, I think somewhere there's a quote by my favorite historian, M.I. Finley, where he says words to the effect, all history is about the present. And it really is, in the sense, all history that is written is about the questions that we, the writers, are asking. I should add as a note that Hannah has done her own bit of historical work and comes from a distinguished line, let me say. I have her father's book, but have not gotten to it as yet. I am very deficient on the topic of American slavery, but my understanding from Brian at Bookish is that this is a book that should be read if one has interest in the topic. Excuse me. Number 8, From a Poet Reads to Write. Congratulations, David, how exciting. Question: you take a remarkably strong and decisive stand against Trump's almighty GOP. How do you balance this with the popularity contest that is YouTube? I guess the only answer there is to say that I don't get into that side of YouTube. I understand it. No videos of mine probably have done better than the ones which are dealing explicitly with the contemporary situation. And so I understand that if you want to ride those kind of waves, for example, there was recently in the United States a well-known right-wing influencer, I guess you would say, this guy who would speak at college campuses, who was shot, assassinated, I think is the word. If I wanted to ride that kind of wave, I could just put that name in the headline or something close enough, and the views would come. I noticed that an awful lot of people in the political side of YouTube do nothing but give you the latest headline with some opinion, and then give a real clickbaity title. The Trump regime is about to topple because of what just happened. And then it's just the headline that everybody else is talking about. And they do this over and over again. And as I said somewhere, it's just, oh, he snagged his fingernail on something. I don't care to go that route. It's not that I'm immune to those kind of pressures, but I have thought about it. And then my final question is, hola, David. This is from Freddie, the sluggish reader. Hola, David. Have you ever had any BookTube-related dreams or nightmares? And this is going to be the quickest answer, because yes, indeed, I have had BookTube-related dreams. Sometimes I will be listening to a BookTuber talk. Sometimes there will be some sort of conversation going on that's sort of responding to a video that I saw, or dealing with a BookTube specific type of question. I can't really call forth any distinct memories of that sort of thing, but they do indeed happen. So this video is approaching an hour, and that is a good time to cut it off. These were all great questions, and I appreciate everybody that took the time to think about this and to write something in. If you have any follow-ups to any of these specifics, please let me know. I mean, I'm sure I could make any of these go on and on and on. And as I said, I will have a timestamp in the description box. So if you want to skip over or just skip back to any question in particular, you have the convenience of doing that. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.